Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is how we roll. We roll together as a team. And what I want to talk to you guys about today is a simple idea. What does it take to stay elite? Because I know after this, you have your dinner to recognize the elite performers. But for my entire career, starting in the mid-1980s, I have been studying what it takes for companies, organizations, or individual contributors to not just become elite for a moment, but to stay elite over time. The secret to becoming and staying elite is the ability to solve problems faster than your competitors or the rate of change inside your prospects. I've come to believe that rapid problem solving is the only sustainable advantage in business today, especially in the world you work in, where the sale gets very complex, doesn't it? And especially in verticals such as financial services or healthcare, where the uncertainty level is high, sales innovation and teamwork, those are the secrets to enduring success. I started down this journey researching collaboration and thinking about the impact of teamwork over a dozen years ago. I'll put you in this place. I was speaking at a conference like this. It was the Disney Executive Partner Conference. At the time, I was the Chief Solutions Officer at Yahoo. You remember that famous case study called Yahoo, right? And this is back like 2003-ish. And the other keynote speaker at the event was Ed Catmull, president of Pixar Entertainment. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, Toy Story is one of the greatest movies of all time. If I gave you my three favorite films, it would be Wizard of Oz, Toy Story, and Pulp Fiction, and not necessarily in that order. So anywho, I'm like backstage with Ed, and I'd done a little bit of research on the Google, which is a verb now for search, and I'd read about this guy that worked for him named John Lasseter, his VP of Creative. And John Lasseter is the guy, that software engineering background, who had come up with the idea for the little television commercial or the commercial they had at a trade show called Wall-E. And it inspired Steve Jobs, who was the lead investor in Pixar Entertainment, a software company, and then they decided to make an entire movie based on that little 30-second commercial. And I was telling Ed, what a genius John Lasseter is. What a genius idea. Make the first movie in a computer using your technology and then tell the story from the toy's point of view. I'm like, brilliant, genius. And Catmull looks at me like I'm an idiot, and he says, the idea was an ugly baby upon arrival. He said, it had problems, Tim. You're going to make a full-length motion picture animation in a computer. He says, at first we estimated the rendering time, 30 years. And then we have to tell the story from the toy's point of view, meaning they're more human than human. Quickly, we figured out we'd have to develop 700 facial controllers for each of the characters to pull that off. And then there was the over-budget issue, which meant it had to be a crossover film that adults bought even more than children. He said, and then we had scripting issues because we weren't an entertainment company. In fact, he said, on Black Friday, November, year 2 of production, Disney shut the movie down. Ed said, I worried the movie would never get made. And then he said something that changed the way I think about sales to this day. He said, Toy Story wasn't a brilliant idea. He told me, Toy Story was 1,000 problems solved. He said, and we solved those problems by getting out of that vertical silo of movie making and building a wide collaborative web. And that's when the two big ideas hit me. Success in sales is about rapid problem solving. I want you to think about the last complex deal you worked on. Whether it's a renewal, whether it's a piece of new business, think about how many problems you had to solve from the beginning to the end. It wasn't about one idea, one perfect pitch, one Grant Cardone-style closing method. No, it was about being steadfast and solving problems. Catmull also asked me the question, what's more important, a good idea or a good team? He said, the answer is the right team. He said, you could take a problematic idea like Toy Story, put the right team around it, widen your boundaries to bring in enough perspectives, and you can change the world. Think about how complicated sales can get for you. The analogy I like to use is leveling up. So when you pursue a sale, you've got to kind of fight your way through 4 levels. And you got to do it fast, right? Because as you know, if you don't get to the top level quickly enough, things can change inside the company you're selling to, right? They get bought, they merge, something happens in the market, there's a reorganization, your champion leaves the company, and you're back to square one. So the 4 levels of the sale are to make contact, getting your foot in the door, getting the influence map, getting access to decision makers and informers. Then you got to move to the second stage, where you conceive of the win-win deal, that mixture of products and services and partners that create your value proposition. Then you have to move to the next level where you convince them that A, they got to change the way they do business, and B, you're the best way to make that change. And when you get through that level, then you got to face the contract level, where there's a lot of hacktivism going on these days, as you know, and you got to get there quickly. So when I started out in sales, I got to say it was a simple world. My first sales job, 1979, I was living in Clovis, New Mexico, selling radio spots for an FM station, KKQQ. And I was given a very small town. You'd ever heard of Clovis. Portales is even smaller, population 10,000, and that was my territory. Very simple. I walked up and down the streets. I knocked on doors. I pitched our rate card. If I had some interest, I got somebody at the station to make a demo. If they liked the demo, I picked up a check. It's pretty easy, right? If I were to compare selling in the late 1970s, or for that matter, the 80s, to a video game, it was about as difficult as this one, Pong. I mean, it got faster. You had to have some coordination. You had to work the numbers, trust the system, fill the funnel. It was a very straightforward type of business. As the years rolled on, it got incredibly complicated with additional decision makers, more technology, harder contracts to negotiate. And I'm telling you today, for all of you in the room, if I were to compare your selling situation with a video game, it's like this. It's like multiplayer Halo 4, right? Where you got to fight your way to the top. Now, why is it so complicated? Why is sales innovation such a big deal to us? Well, I'll tell you, there's a couple of reasons. For the last few years, I've been working with Corporate Executive Board, who does a lot of research on how buyers choose suppliers. Corporate Executive Board would tell you that today, especially for those of you selling B2B, going to corporations selling a high technology, high information process, you've got 5.4 average decision makers involved in the process. And most of the time, you only get in front of 3 of them at the most. And they're a very dysfunctional, diverse team. Right? So maybe you have the end business user. You've got a technology person who's looking over the integration. Now you've got an information security person that cares about the outcome. Then you get somebody from procurement. And then you get somebody that thinks they know something about your technology. I'll just take an example, digital marketing. And all of a sudden now, you got agencies, you got procurement firms. You've got multiple decision makers. And your biggest job now is to get them to all come to consensus. That's why, in my consulting experience over the last decade, I've worked on 100 different sales projects, specific deals that were stuck, that were at least $3 million in value. And what we've learned is 80% of the time, it wasn't that the client said no, it was that there was no decision. They couldn't come to consensus, so they just stuck with the way things are. And so that creates one level of complication that says, how are you going to innovate your way to get all 5.4 to understand your value proposition and then come to agreement? That's an innovation challenge. It's not just about persistence. I mentioned before uncertainty, but there's this other issue that everything we sell is more technical than it's ever been. If you think about how much technology is built into products, especially services that are based on putting insights around information for decision making, there's so much technology laced into it. The learning curve, especially for non-technical decision makers, is like climbing a mountain. And this is where all the pressure comes on us to move the customer to change quickly enough to win. So this puts pressure on us. How do we become more innovative? Innovation is not about having an idea. Innovation is when the solution makes its way to the market. It's when the idea becomes an answer to a problem. It's real. So in my mind, innovation, whether it's product development, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales and business development, it follows 3 specific steps: curiosity, collaboration, and execution. In 1997, I quit a really good job to go to work for a freakishly tall, very smart man and work in his loft here in Dallas. It was broadcast.com. That's the company that eventually went public, but at the time it was called AudioNet, and he was Mark Cuban. And there was a lot of things that impressed me about Mark Cuban, not his dancing, but there was a lot of other things that impressed me about Mark Cuban. But what I was so floored by at the time is what a voracious reader he was about anything adjacent to his business. When I met him in July of 1997, that dude had read over 50 books, cover to cover, that calendar year already on a variety of subjects. He called it edge-level curiosity. He was curious about the future of telepresence, which they now call high definition. He was curious about how the markets were structured around financing, which became really the secret sauce in him having the biggest opening day in IPO history. He was curious about how brands were built. He was curious about so many subjects, it made him a master of predicting the future. And I used to think to myself, how can this guy read so many books? And it's because he knew that, he said this once, every business book he read was worth $10,000 to his valuation. So he attached a reward to curiosity, made him a curious person. So let's put this into action for you. What does that mean in the field in terms of how you think about the customer or the client? Here's the takeaway. Go Columbo. But those of you that might not be of my generation, check it out on Nickelodeon. Anyway, it's an incredible acumen this guy has. I mean, Columbo wasn't necessarily a genius. He was a relentlessly curious investigator. Remember? He'd interview somebody. He'd fake them out. He'd kind of walk away. And then a question would come to him. And he'd go back and he'd apologize. He'd say, I'm sorry, can I ask one more question? And he'd bug him, and he'd bug him, and he'd reveal the key piece of information like a precocious kid that would crack the case. In my philosophy, sales performance, it starts with strong product knowledge and a clear understanding of your company's true capabilities. Not just your technology stack, but your partner space. Every single business unit across your company. In the research we did for the book at Deeper Media, we found people that had a strong knowledge about every one of their business units in large, diversified companies like yours, on the average outperformed the general index by almost 20% on year-over-year bookings. In other words, the elite are not just curious in front of the customer, the elite are very curious behind the firewall to understand exactly what they have to sell, what they can bring to bear. And I believe these are the secrets that make a curious person highly successful. Let me give you an example from my Yahoo days. So Yahoo buys the company from Cuban. He buys the Dallas Mavericks. I go to California. Yahoo is in a lot of trouble at this point. By March of 2000, .com crash is upon us. And unlike Excite and Lycos, who are dead now, we did have some traditional customers, and immediately by mid-2000, we realized we had to do a bunch of big deals with a bunch of big logos to send a message to the market that we had a strong customer base. And we had some problems. We had a lot of problems getting into major accounts like Disney Theatrical. They just didn't believe that a banner ad on the homepage of Yahoo could actually get somebody to go see their movie on opening weekend. So we had a guy that worked for us, Ken Mallon, who's gone on to be the president of a lot of digital marketing companies, a very successful guy now. But back then, he was a data engineer inside a research group, and he had curiosity because he was motivated. He needed to elevate the strategic value of that group that was called Full Service. They were requiring a lot of resources. They just bought a company called Hyperparallel that had rocket scientists in it, so they had to put it to work. So we invited him in on a Dealstorm project on the Disney team, and he started to get curious about whether we were trying to solve the right problem. So he would go Columbo on us, like, well, why do you think they're not writing us a check? Well, they don't value banner ads. Why don't they value banner ads? Well, they think it works better to run a TV commercial on Friends. And he'd bug us like a little kid. Well, why do they want to run a commercial on Friends? That sounds expensive. Well, because there's 50 million people watching at one time, and it's multimedia. So then he took all those questions, and he went off and did some research. And he found a case study, and I'm going to actually show you slides he presented to us. He found a case study of where Yahoo search data, beginning in 1999, had started to be tracked by a different group in the company of data miners. And what they were doing is they were looking at the correlation between search activity and market activity. It was a study on Ford. So in this case study, what Ken notices is that when a press release goes out, search traffic for the Ford Focus went up. They did an MTV Video Music Award, search traffic went up. They did an integrated campaign with a concert series, it spikes, it goes back up with Car of the Year. And so he asks himself, I wonder if we could apply this search data to the movie-making business. So then he starts to collaborate. He starts to work with the Yahoo Movies team that goes out in the partner space and licenses showbiz data. He partners with one of those rocket scientists, Elliot, from Hyperparallel to build an algorithm, and he studies a really awful movie, but it was very, very important to us at the time to study the results, the movie The Cell with Jennifer Lopez. And what he did was he took a look at search activity for The Cell, Jennifer Lopez, and he compared it to actual box office sales 1 week later. And he saw something that blew his mind. He saw a very strong, if not significant, correlation between buzz today and box office in a week. And by the way, this is a game changer for movie studios, okay? Because they buy a third of all their TV advertising out of fear at the last moment. Because if you don't kill it on opening weekend, your movie's gonna die. So Ken asked himself the question, what if we're selling the wrong product? What if data could provide insights to them to optimize their hundreds of millions of dollars they spend every year on TV? In other words, what if the tail could wag the dog? So they went out and they studied a series of movies. They conducted a bunch of tests. Let me show you the slide we showed to the president of Disney Studios that caused him to not only gasp, but write the first check to Yahoo. This one. We tracked these movies, and this is not a self-selected sample. These are literally the movies we tracked. The worst we did in making a 1 week prediction on box office was 82%. By the way, NRG data, which they were using at the time based on focus groups, was like, 51%, which for them was like gold. The point of it is that the curiosity Ken brought to the picture not only helped us crack the case, it dramatically elevated what full service and data mining meant and created our initial targeting programs, which helped us reestablish our relationships with agencies in 2001 and 2002. And even though the Yahoo case study has gone sideways, I'm telling you, some of the greatest leaders right now in the space, LinkedIn CEO Jeffrey Weiner, presidents of Pandora, number 2 at Airbnb, number 2 at Tesla, they all come from this group of collaborators inside Yahoo that insisted on asking why. Now, I know you are on a transition, like everybody in complex sales, from relationship-based sales, I'm responsive, I'm fast, I'm interested in, what you like, to insight-based sales. I can challenge the way you think about business in such a way that creates a commercial opportunity and establishes us as an expert and helps you build consensus. The more curious you are, the easier it is to find that insight that the client has or the prospect has that you can update, that you can commercially teach to make yourself the only solution to the problem. Now, transitioning here. Curiosity gets you a lot of information. Curiosity uncovers new strategies, but you can't solve problems on your own. Steve Jobs, real hero of mine, when we were researching a couple of years ago, we launched a survey. We went out and asked over 3,000 folks, just like you with our partner Market Tools, very simple, open-ended question. Who invented the iPod? Open-ended question, not multiple choice, because if it's open-ended, you don't get a whole lot of, people all saying the same things. We figured we'd get about 10 answers. We figured the winning answer would be about 20%. The winning answer was 75%. In other words, 75% of the people in this survey had an answer when we asked them who invented the iPod. Want to guess who they thought it was? Steve Jobs. Not Johnny Ive. Johnny Ive was 4%. Apple Design Studio, 1%. It was Steve Jobs. Why? Because there's something in our culture, this idea of the lone wolf, the lone inventor, the lone genius, the one person that can solve anything by him or herself. This idea is part of our mythology. It's part of how we think of everything in a hero's culture. But if you ask Steve Jobs, he would tell you All the great things in business are built by teams, not by individuals. He said, I'm embarrassed when people think I invented the iPod or the iPhone. He says, as a leader, I create collisions through the design of the workspace, the project space, how I incent people, and I demand execution, if not perfection. And to him, that's how Apple became the great company they are today. And this doesn't just work for product development. In the world of sales, understand something. Genius is a team sport. MHI Global, for years, studied what they call the world-class sales organization. The world-class sales organization outperforms their nearest rival by about 20% across key metrics like annual cash value per account, market penetration in key verticals, or even top-line revenue. And they tried to figure out what they all have in common, and guess what? It wasn't product quality. It wasn't leadership bench strength. In 2014, they released the results of their study, and what was it? It was a habit, a cultural habit of conscious collaboration across business units or departments in pursuit of big opportunities. Now, why would that make a company world-class? Not just because they win the big deals, because in my experience, we saw a 70% close ratio, $2.5 billion of deal flow B2B with this process. It's a bigger thing than that. They got more renewals. They had less turnover. They had higher net promoter scores. They had more innovation in product and marketing, because culture is a conversation led by leaders and punctuated by action about how we do things here. And in a sales-driven culture, nothing changes the company's way of thinking like a big win done the right way. So in those companies, as they came together across departments and they won the big deals, it had a cascading effect to every other group inside the company to do the same thing. The other thing they found out in MHI Global's research is that when you bring the delivery team and you bring the marketing team to the table early, they are highly engaged, and then later, when there is some difficulty on integration or delivery, they're willing and enthusiastic to bring everything they can to the solution. I was interviewing the Chief Operating Officer of SAP Cloud, Mark Schmitz, and he talked about the idea that the secret for Ariba, which then became SAP Cloud, was that they always tried to work with the land of no, finance, revenue recognition, legal, et cetera, whenever possible, as early as possible on the biggest game-changing deals. Because Mark's like, when you partner with them early, he says, they're not the police, they are your partners. They are incredibly creative. He said they solved incredible pricing issues for us, recognition issues on how to implement deals. They brought legal in a little bit later when the contract looked certain, but they solved issues like the no contract hack they were facing from SaaS startups that created tremendous risk on them. And he even went to the point where at their annual President's Club retreat, they now have at least 2 non-salespeople that are invited to participate. I believe last year it was someone from finance and someone from operations. And they invite them to recognize that in the culture they operate in, genius is a team sport. Even in our research, we understood that it's not just about collaborating generally, it's about a specific number I want you to think about. So here's a takeaway. Harness the power of 4. So over the course of these 100 projects and then comparing this research with innovation experts, what we've learned is that when you're trying to solve the problem, bringing in more perspectives dramatically increases your chance of finding the solution that solves the problem. The power of 4 looks like this. When you are in a silo think, sales, and we are, sales has sales think. We have a perspective, we have a set of constraints. When you add the second perspective to the mix, another BU, another department, another way of seeing the world, your chance of finding the solution goes up by 50%. So think sales plus marketing. When you add the third perspective to the mix, think of it as customer delivery, customer success, just a third perspective. Your chance of finding the solution goes up to 100%. But here's the magic, and this is really what's interesting. When you add the fourth perspective to the team, the chance of solving the problem goes up 300%. And then, of course, as you add more people, you add chaos, and it starts to decline rapidly. The bliss point then is 4. So that's what I want you to think about the next time you get stuck in a big sales challenge. It could be a piece of new business, it could be a renewal, it could be an account save. I want you to ask yourself, have we built the Fantastic Four? And I don't just mean 4 departments, really focus on the idea of 4 different ways of seeing the world. See, every invention in history is just the combination of 2 or more ingredients in a way that hasn't been done before. That's it. Otherwise, it'd be called a discovery, like electricity. It's really about combining ideas with other ideas based on different perspectives. And I believe it's not our ideas that become obsolete in this fast-changing world. It's the things we think we can't do, the constraints, that become obsolete in this ever-changing world, especially for those of you dealing a lot with compliance, because as you'll see, from healthcare to financial services, compliance is a moving game. And as the lid gets lifted, the fast will take a lot of market share, but they'll bring in people that don't know what they don't know and rapidly innovate. I mentioned before deal storming. So deal storming puts a process around brainstorming because, quite frankly, without a process, you get a mess. I mean, I don't know about you, but a lot of the brainstorming meetings I've been in my career, they were horrible experiences, man. They were like goat rodeos, right? It's like you're rounded into the room, some random collection of people. Somebody reads a problem at you and says, okay, everybody, think up ideas. And then they say the stuff that makes me crazy, like, we're just going for quantity. There's no such thing as a bad idea. I want you to go for wild ideas. And then some person next to him, some yay, who was writing everything down on a flip chart, and after an hour, you finally get out of the room, you never hear back. That is not a way of creating innovation and problem solving. So what we learn with deal storming is that you move through a 7-step process. And the 7-step process starts with qualify. So what you want to do is you want to qualify the opportunity for collaboration because collaboration has a high cost. At Sterling Software, for example, they would collaborate with their internal SAP experts on an integration deal. And in the book Collaboration, Morten Hansen found those reps actually were selling less than the other reps that stuck with their existing sales process, trusted their sales enablement resources, and moved forward. So you got to qualify collaboration based on the size of the opportunity and the degree of difficulty. You might have a terrific trio, a Fantastic Four. If it's a game changer, you might build the Justice League, but you qualify. And then you organize the team. The secret sauce in deal storming is to ask yourself 2 questions. Question 1, who has a stake in the outcome? Because they're going to be really engaged around the solution. So you might bring in customer delivery who has to live with the deal. You might bring in integration. You might bring in someone from finance that has to deal with the revenue recognition, or you might bring someone in from marketing that cares a lot about winning this deal for positioning. There's this way of thinking at big companies, and it goes like this. If you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu, okay? So people that get brought in early in a sales challenge who usually aren't brought in are enthusiastic. Think of them as your blockers and tacklers, okay? High level of engagement. It's like the difference between ham and eggs, okay? The chicken's involved, but the pig is fully committed. Collaboration requires people outside of sales that care enough about the outcome to do a lot of heavy lifting, and then a lot of good ideas come to you that way. The second question you're going to ask them is, who is an expert about my problem? Why am I stuck, and who knows something about it? And this is what I want you to put to work tonight during your elite dinner. I want you to meet other elites, meet other people in other groups, and create standing collaboration deals, figuring out what they're an expert on, what kind of companies they've worked with, what kind of decision makers they've been able to deal with, like chief information security officers. Find those experts. So those are your skill players, and that's how you organize a team. And to Alexander's point, when you organize a team around a sales opportunity, make sure you've got a big why behind it all. It's not about the revenue. You're not going to get somebody in operations, get somebody in customer success as excited about the revenue as you are. So at Yahoo, I used to love competition. I would explain that if we don't win this deal with P&G, in sales you call that Procter & Gamble, if we don't win this deal with P&G, AOL and Ted Turner are going to win this deal, and it would make everybody in our company crazy. So I could get engineers, data miners to come off of their job and volunteer in our deal storm because the why was big. At companies like Career Builder, they use pursuit of excellence, their key value at the company. At other organizations, they might use reputation, but whatever it is, organize around a why, and don't invite people to come to a meeting. That sounds horrible. Invite them to join a team that's driving to a big why to get a big win. The rest of the steps of the process are really simple. You got to prepare that team. Here's a takeaway I want you to think about. If you're going to have a deal storm team and you're going to collaborate around a sales challenge, schedule it for Tuesday, and by the end of the day, Thursday, issue a deal brief. And the deal brief can't be more than 4 pages or no one's going to read it. Keep it around 3. And this would be the account executive's role. You build the deal brief by stating the problem and its root cause, identifying the opportunity both at a revenue and a big why level, showing the influence map, including LinkedIn links, and then explaining everything we've tried to date, how it worked with Salesforce automation links if appropriate, or other sharing links. And then give each person on your team a thinking assignment based on their capabilities. It might be to do some research. It might be to come up with some ideas. It might be to punch holes in your problem statement. But when you do this and you send it out on Thursday, and you hassle everyone on your team on Friday to read it before they go home, the weekend becomes the incubation period. See, that's where creativity really happens. That's why brainstorming leads to such bad ideas. No one's had time to incubate the problem. But if you trigger that, then on Tuesday, people show up at your meeting with clarity about the idea that they want to promote, as well as the assumptions, and your meeting will rock. The rest of the cycle is clear. You have a meeting, you execute, you analyze how you did, you report it to everyone on the team to close the loop, and you repeat the cycle. And in a very big, very complex sale, you're going to have to go through the cycle 2 or 3 times to get it right. But as I explained, we've seen a dramatic increase in closing ratio with a dramatic compression in the sales cycle by unleashing innovation to just level up and level up faster and faster. So I think the most important thing you should do at the beginning of all of your collaboration meetings, you should spend at least 15 minutes on this, is getting to the root cause of the problem. Too often, the account executive is trying to solve a symptom because it's right in our face. They're not calling us back. I want you to go through this. It was developed in Japan. You can download this worksheet. But basically, it's called the 5 whys. And what they learned in quality back in the days of Deming, who I worked for right out of grad school, is that if you ask why 5 times, like a little kid, you will get to the root cause. And as John Dewey wrote, a problem well-defined is half solved. You'll spend the rest of your meeting going through the solution discussion. And this was another big aha for me when I studied facilitation. We learned that in a great solution discussion, it's like the aperture of a camera lens. You've got the opening, you've got the narrowing, where we begin to look at ideas that can be combined or eliminate ideas with faulty assumptions, and then we close as a team on the next play. That doesn't mean they come to consensus. It just means everyone in the room can live with the next play. And so that's the secret, I think, in driving an effective meeting that will get you to the next stage and help you cycle through those 1,000 problems. I want to close with 2 points here. Point number 1, if you want to be a really good collaborator, if you want to be able to build really good deal storm teams, make relationships across experience starting today. It's like really an accident in my career, but I think the thing that helped me the most at Yahoo is when I started in 2000, I made the decision never to eat lunch in the lunchroom with sales. And it was like, I'll never forget it. I was telling my wife about it. I called her. I said, this is a really weird place. All the conference rooms are named after Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Everybody looks like they're out of Dr. Seuss with black Daria hair and pointy boots. But I said, the worst part is the lunchtime cafeteria, and it was called URLs, get it, Earls? The cafeteria was like a scene out of the movie Clueless. Engineers were sitting together with their propellers heads, right? The data miners were sitting together with their calculators and slide rules. The sales guys were sitting together counting their money. I'm just kidding. All the groups were so segregated, I just made the decision, I'll sit with another group. So I'd walk over to like the customer delivery team and I'd sit down. They'd say, what do you do? I'd say, I'm in sales. And they'd beat me up about all the stuff we threw over the wall. I'd take my beating like Oprah, real empathetic. And then I'd ask them, what's your wow project? And they start talking about things they're working on, and it would reveal to me, almost every conversation, it would reveal to me a place where I could help. And I'd say, hey, I'll help you on that PowerPoint. I can do PowerPoint. I'll help you make that pitch for your budget approval. I'll help you make a contact with that person in marketing to get you that data for your next presentation. And over the course of the first year at Yahoo, all I did was favors for other groups. And I started to build these relationships. And then when the Disney account came up, and our chief sales officer said, Tim, I want you to build a team around it, I called my buddies. People I'd done favors for the whole year. They came from across all departments, and we won the deal. And it taught me something. The best time to build relationships inside your company is long before you need them. So go out, be a good listener, find a place where you can add value, do favors, expect nothing in return, and building teams will be nothing to you. So I'll just ask you a question. In a sales-driven organization like Experian, if not you, then who sets the example that together we win? And if not now, right when you get home, starting tonight, when do you make that leap from a collaborative culture to the world-class elite organization? Thank you guys very much. It's been a privilege.
Well, thank you, Tim. Let's give Tim one more round of applause. You know, I think there were so many great messages to take from that presentation, and what a way to end our sales summit. But I think if you really, think about it, start building the relationships, start building them right now.